Minutes to rest before the bell. The mine boss hollered, "Get up, whoever you are, and get a pickaxe. Give me enough coal to start another hell and keep it burning. Mine me enough to start another hell." John Henry said to his captain, "A man ain't nothing but a man. But if you bring that steam drill around, I'll beat it fair and honest. I'll die with my hammer in my hand, but I'll be laughing, 'cause you can't replace a steel driving man." There was a big crowd of people at the mountain. John Henry said to the steam drill, "How is you?" "Pardon me, Mr. Steam Drill, I suppose you didn't hear me. I said, how you?" "Well, can you turn a jack? Can you lay a track? Can you pick and shovel too? Listen, this hammer swinger's talking to you." People hollered, "Go, John Henry!" Then somebody hollered, "The mountain's caving in!" John Henry told the captain, "Tell the kind folks don't to worry. It ain't nothing but my hammer sucking wind. It keeps me breathing. This steel driver's muscle, I ain't 10. Captain, tell the people move back further. I'm at the finish line and there ain't no drill. It's so far behind, but yet ain't got the brains to quit it. When she blows up, she'll scatter across the hills, Lord, Lord. When she blows up, she'll scatter across the hills." Well, John Henry had a little woman. I believe the lady's name was Polly Ann. Yeah, that was his good woman. John Henry threw his hammer over his shoulder and went on home.
Hello, everybody. All right, we have a very special lecture today, one that I think will be very close to your hearts. This is Stella Cavell. Stella is a super TA from the past, from 61B. She graduated last spring, has been working in industry, and has a lot of insight into what jobs look like a year out from graduating in the new AI future. So I'll just turn it over to you, Stella, and let you take it away. Thank you, Stella, for being here.
Okay, can you guys hear me okay? Thumbs up. Okay, cool. So yeah, I'm Stella. I'm here to talk about AI in software engineering. Before we get started, please try to find and sit next to a partner. There's a lot of interactive parts to the lecture, group work, group discussions. So make sure you're sitting next to at least one other person before we get started. All right, we're gonna start with a poll. I'm keeping it high engagement here. I want you to raise your hand if you've used AI to explain code. Okay, cool. Now keep your hand raised if you've used AI to write tests. Okay, maybe a little less. What about AI to debug something in your project went wrong? Okay, lastly, what about AI for a full feature or full project? Okay, maybe some less hands. And then, if so, was it a generally positive experience or negative experience? Or maybe somewhere in the middle? Crashed out once, it succeeded once. Kind of curious. Okay, cool. I'm seeing a lot of thumbs up, which is good. All right, so what am I going to talk about today? Well, first I'm going to do an introduction. I'm going to tell you about myself and what I've learned this past year. Second, I'm going to talk about what does AI in software development look like today. And third, what are the most important skills that you should know today so you're prepared to go out into industry. And lastly, we'll end with some Q&A, so save your questions to the end. All right, so starting out with an introduction, I'm Stella, I use the She series, and I just graduated in 2025, so pretty much exactly a year ago today. These are some graduation photos with Hug. And a little more about me. We have to go back all the way to spring 2022, which was when I took 61B, which is when I was a student sitting in one of these seats that you're sitting in right now. And when we took 61B, we did not have AI. If you remember, ChatGPT was launched November of 2022. So there was no way to quickly ChatGPT a quick question about the class, which meant I went to office hours all the time. I think I was averaging like 10 hours a week in office hours. You know, first I would check the spec, then I would try Google search, maybe some Stack Overflow, it would usually fail, and I'd head straight to office hours and talk to the TAs for my entire afternoon. And it actually became my favorite class at Berkeley, I think for 3 reasons. The first was the projects. Like, I thought they were so fun. Being able to do build your own world, get lit, all of the above were great. Secondly, being able to do them from scratch. I think 61A just gave too much scaffolding. I felt like I couldn't be as creative, so 61B really unlocked that for me. And then third, the TAs. They were awesome, so supportive. I loved my discussion sections. I felt like every time I went to lecture, I was engaged. And so, given that, I became a TA, and I spent 3 years on course staff. Maybe you recognize me from an exam walkthrough video. And I actually did some guest lectures when I was a TA. I did one on good code documentation and clean code. I did one on collaboration in software engineering, and I actually did one last semester as well on AI and software engineering. All right, so from my experience as a 61B student, I then went into industry, and this was the summer of 2023, my sophomore year summer. I was an intern at Oracle, and Oracle is a huge software company that builds tools and products for other companies. So for example, like car companies, like Goldman Sachs, and they'll build out whatever tools necessary to make their company succeed. And an internship is typically 12 weeks, I would say, and it took me 6 weeks to onboard. You might be asking, what? Why is that? That's literally half the time. Why weren't you writing code? Well, first, the knowledge was scattered. I didn't know who to ask about what. There were documents everywhere, but a lot of them hadn't been updated. Secondly, the code base is huge. I was used to working on like 61B projects, maybe 61C, that were like a few thousand lines of code, and I got into industry and saw like hundreds of thousands of lines of code, and so I was really intimidated and didn't really know where to start. Third, just blockers. I think like waiting for permissions, waiting to get my computer set up, asking people about certain things and how they worked. So then that left 6 weeks to actually code. And what I was doing is I was actually working on a feedback tool. So they gave me this full stack project where I had to implement like a thumbs up, a thumbs down button on a UI and like a feedback text box, and then figure out like, okay, how do we send that feedback to all the teams involved? It was like an internal tool for engineers. And I had to do this with no AI tools. We didn't have anything. So what did that mean? I had to learn a new language. I had to learn React. Had never worked in that before. Had to like read the docs, take a 1-week course, really understand that language. And all code was written line by line. There was no like auto assist to fill in the words. There was no ChatGPT to generate things. So it's like a lot of manual work. And I think what this resulted in is I did this like, I would say around 1,000 line of code project for the internship, and at the end I was super proud of it. But that's kind of what an internship looked like back in 2023. All right, so now we're 1 year later. It's summer of 2024, and I accepted an internship at Microsoft in Seattle. And this time, it took me only 2 weeks to onboard. What happened? Well, Microsoft released an internal Copilot tool that answers questions immediately. It's basically our internal version of ChatGPT. You could ask a question, and it would scan the code base, it would scan all the internal Microsoft Word documents, scan Excel sheets, and it would give you an answer like within a few minutes. So I found that super duper helpful for my onboarding. No more waiting for someone to respond. No more asking, who should I ask? So then that gave me 10 weeks of actual coding. And this summer I was working on some data center build out tools, also full stack. And this summer we had GitHub Copilot, which was really neat. I think GitHub Copilot was really good at generating like 20 to 50 line code chunks. I feel like I would ask it to make like methods for me. I'd ask it to fix something about a certain chunk of code. And I found its responses really good for that size. It was mainly front end that I feel like it could do completely autonomously. Like for the front end of what I was working on, I didn't really touch much of the code and let Copilot take that away. But it was still error prone. Like one time it just hallucinated that there was a file that didn't exist. It also hallucinated a library. So I feel like there was a lot of like human in the loop of like me and Copilot going back and forth all summer, like, hey, that's not right. Fix this, fix that. So what this resulted in is I probably did like 2,000 lines of code this summer, which was like way bigger than my Oracle internship. That's like double the size of code that I wrote. So I was really proud of that, and I don't think that would have been possible without GitHub Copilot. I also finished my project early. I feel like that was really cool. I was like, oh, you know, that was earlier than expected. And I was able to lead an additional project about something I cared about, which is accessibility improvements. Our tool had a user interface, and there were a lot of things that needed accessibility improvements, and I made those improvements at the end of the internship. All right, so now I've graduated, done with internships, and I step into my full-time role in 2025 at Meta. And I had a very similar speedy onboarding experience, like this 2 weeks, I can ask all the questions I want, I'm feeling empowered, ready to go. And also, I ended up shipping my first code to production on day 3 at Meta, which I found amazing. And I find now that LLMs can code really confidently. We were using GPT, and I felt like it was way beyond what GitHub Copilot was doing. I felt like it could do, you know, 100+ line chunks of code across multiple files, functions, and classes. And I never wrote a single test to this day. I've had AI write all my unit tests at Meta. I still felt in 2025 it was struggling a lot with C++, which is a language that my team uses and is 90% of what my team works on. Longer tasks, like projects that could take weeks. Debugging, you know, if I was on call, I felt like it really struggled to understand error logs. And lastly, hallucinations, still making things up that didn't exist and just completely gaslighting me. So by end of 12 weeks at Meta, I had around 20,000 lines of code shipped to production. Like, whoa, like that was crazy. And 80% of that code was generated by AI. This is like in 2025, like really, really recently. And the reason I say 80% is I feel like the other 20% was either like small things that I felt like I could fix faster than AI, because sometimes the AI would be laggy, or things that I manually had to intervene because AI just could not do it. So that was like the 20% that AI didn't do. And so now it's 2026, and things have changed once again. We now have this term called vibe coding. And I want to take a volunteer to just give me a definition for vibe coding. Can someone raise their hand? Yeah, right here.
It's having an AI agent do the coding for you.
Yeah, exactly. Having an AI agent do the code for you. And the way I like to think about it is, you know, you talk to your AI agent, give it a task, and then you go and you vibe. You're like this little penguin. You're like, I'm just going to vibe. And then you come back and check what it does. So instead of there being a human in the loop, we like give something to an AI, we step away, do something completely else, and we come back and look at it. That was the difference. And the main reason this happened is because we got Claude Code at Meta. So Claude Code we got, I think, January 1st of 2026, And this model, Opus 4.6, came out in February. So this was huge, brand new tools. And now I felt like AI could handle full features, like 1,000+ lines of code. I was starting to see my teammates generate a 1,000 lines of code feature and put it up for review. I was like, wow, that's never happened before. It can also like run terminals and commands in your terminal. I thought this was great because it's really hard to keep up with all the Git commands and other commands that your industry might have. And it can also send messages, write docs, comment on your behalf. Sometimes I have AI write up a Google Doc for me. I can have it send a message to a teammate about a certain investigation. It is really like all powerful. Lastly, I felt like it was good at doing a deep data analysis and debugging, which I had never seen before. I thought it had always struggled with those and now was finally succeeding. Okay, so today, what has my workflow changed to be? I feel like now I'm really parallelizing many projects, tasks, and investigations at the same time. Work that I thought I could, never do, just me, myself, and I can now do. I can automate repeated tasks. A good example of this is we had like a weekly summary post for my team about everyone's updates, what was going on in the company. And before I had to like manually spend an hour to like bring all that information together and make that weekly post. And now I just completely automated it with AI to search all the groups, create the post, and post it for me. Third, we can do overnight agentic flows. This is one I find really interesting. Like I can set up something right before I go to bed that I know is going to take a really long time and have it run overnight and then come back in the morning and there's code for me there to review. And also my role changed a lot. I think previously a software engineer's role was mainly just about like writing code. And now I feel like a software engineer's role is to be more end-to-end. You are the product manager of the feature you're building. You're the actual engineer writing the code. You're the data analyst collecting all the data that comes out of whatever you're building. You're the customer support managing any feedback you get. And you can do all of that as a software engineer. So it just unlocks so much more potential, and I find that so exciting. And lastly, we're taking up projects that we never thought were possible. Mainly like my team wanted to convert our code base into Rust because it's a lot faster. We were able to do that in a week. And originally that had been scoped for like an entire year. Okay, so recap, I want you to turn to a partner around you and talk about what changed and what stayed the same over the past few years. I'll give you guys 30 seconds. The lines are also like added and deleted.
But then sometimes I feel like the code is like very sloppy sometimes.
It can be.
And like it generates a method that was already generated. Why?
It probably depends. Yeah. Good question though. We can talk more about it. All right. Does anyone want to volunteer for what changed? I can take one hand. What changed? Any thoughts? Yeah. Yeah, I'm not actually coding. What I have is how fast we write code and the tools used. Like in the span of 4 years, it was a different tool every single year, so we had to adapt to that. How about stayed the same? Anyone, a hand? Anything stayed the same? All right, it's all good if you're shy. Well, I think understanding what you're building, why you're building it, and who it's for remains so important. And knowing trade-offs, like in constraints, runtime, data structures, architecture, AI doesn't know what's going to fit your use case the best. You still have to put in that design effort. And this is what 61B teaches you and why 61B remains still super relevant and the #1 class to prepare you for a role as a software engineer. And lastly, code and design review. Still important to get feedback from your teammates and iterate based on that. Lastly, collaboration, working with others still is super important. Even though we have AI, there's so many cross-functional products, talking to different teams, talking to your teammates, collaborating with them, making sure everyone understands what you're building, and that still remains important. And today, you can see the news. We have major AI transformations happening at pretty much every large software company, and so this is the motivation why I want to come back today, is there is kind of a gap of what you learn in school and entering industry and then seeing how much AI there is. So I just want to help you guys with all the tips I've learned in the past year, and so that you guys can succeed in this role if you decide to do it. Okay, so what does AI in software development even look like today? Can be a little more specific now. But we need to start with the question of what is software engineering? I want you to turn to your partner and also talk about this now, just for 30 seconds. What is software engineering? Give it your best go. All right, does anyone want to be a brave volunteer to volunteer their definition for software engineering? Yes, please. Yeah, great definition. Anyone else have anything to add? Yeah. Yeah, making computers do stuff. Totally. Well, we can look at the definition from ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini. But I think, these are really vague. Even what you guys said, it's a little vague, oh, you're just building software. And I think for me that was really confusing as a student. I didn't understand okay, what does this actually mean when you do it? So I want to talk about the day in the life as a software engineer and what the software development cycle looks like, what literally I would do on any given day to kind of help understand what software engineering is. So usually a day starts with planning and dividing tasks. Maybe you got a project, you need to break it down into a set of tasks. Or maybe you got a task and you need to break it down into different segments of code you're going to do over time. Secondly, you're going to write and test that code locally. So just by yourself on your own computer, you're going to write your code, test it, make sure it works. And once you're done, you open something called a pull request. And this is great because it's going to allow others to look at your code, leave comments on it, and it's kind of the step before it actually gets pushed out to production. Because production code needs to remain super high quality. So the code on your computer and then the code that's in production might be years apart. You need to make a bunch of edits, you get feedback from team members, so you open the pull request to get feedback on the code that you wrote. Fourth, you're going to get the code review. Someone on your team might leave feedback on the code, an AI might leave feedback on the code. And then you'll probably go into a loop of making some additional edits, doing some more refactoring, doing additional testing, I feel like is the main one. Usually I get hey, can you test this out a little bit more? I'm not sure what these changes do. And lastly, when it's all approved, goes through that cycle, it can be merged and released into production, because that's now the highest quality code. Okay, well let's take a look at an example. I work at Meta, so let's talk about an Instagram example. Say I am a software engineer and I wake up and my task today is to create different themes on the direct messages. Has anyone ever used this before? Change the theme of their message? Okay, yeah, there's a few themes you can change it to, and it makes it fun to use Instagram. So how I do this is first, I would get the task feature for Instagram users to change background colors of their direct messages. I'd write maybe 100 lines of code, unit tests. I'd probably test manually on a test device, make sure it's looking good, test out all the different colors. I'd open this pull request, I'd make sure to like title it relevantly, put a summary of what I added, and then a test plan of all the different like screenshots of everything I verified. Then I'll submit it for code review, and I'll get code review from my teammate. My teammate says, hey, you need to add more colors. Right now you only have 5 colors, but we want to offer like 10 to our users. So I'll go back and I'll edit the code, and then I'll get a final stamp of approval, and maybe I have a merge conflict. Someone else on my team was also working on something within the messaging, so I need to make sure to resolve that merge conflict. That's when 2 people are working on the same file. And then merge and release my code to production. It's kind of like day in the life. But now let's talk about what AI has enabled in that process. I kind of talked about it a lot like manually, what I was doing, clicking buttons, writing code. How does AI kind of incorporate itself into this process? The first is the planning stage. It's really, really helpful to use AI to research best practices. For example, maybe Facebook direct messages already created this feature, and all we need to do is like copy their code or copy their library. AI can help you figure that out. Or maybe we have like accessibility requirements for the UI, like colors have to be a certain contrast, and AI can help you verify. Secondly, the writing code. What used to take hours now takes seconds. AI could write 100% of the code and 100% of the unit tests. You still might need some manual work here to like verify on a test device, but even that is becoming AI-enabled now with like AI-enabled browser searching, AI-enabled phone browsing, so maybe even that could be done with AI. Third, I think it's really helpful for submitting these pull requests, dealing with all the complexities of Git and not having to worry about it yourself. It's also great at writing really concise summaries and concise test plans. I feel like in the past, when people have wrote it, they've been like overly verbose or just hard to understand. So I feel like AI is really helpful in this step. Then the code review portion. Right now at work, AI does a first pass on all of our pull requests. Just make sure like everything high level, like formatting, linting, if this file is like a certain severity where it's caused issues in the past, it like goes through all this checklist of things before a human reviewer even looks at it. And then you might get a human review, might get additional AI reviews, but making sure this is thorough is the most important. And then the additional edits, with a simple prompt, you can tell AI, hey, based on these comments, fix this up. And lastly, it can resolve any merge conflicts, deal with the complexities of Git, and release for you. So AI really accelerates this cycle and this whole process. So now I want to kind of talk about, okay, now that we have AI, what actually matters? I think this planning and dividing task stage is so important. There's a key shift we're seeing. Writing code is becoming cheaper and easier, so planning now matters more than ever. If you give AI a vague or bad spec, it's just going to generate a lot of bad code that you're going to end up needing to garbage. A good spec will make AI way more useful because it'll tell the model what matters, what doesn't matter, and how the work is going to be judged. And the engineer's value is moving now more upstream into defining the right problem and downstream into verifying the right result. Okay, what about the steps in the middle? Well, AI can now accelerate the building phase, and the tools are just going to keep improving. I think all these steps are going to become so easy for you to do when you enter industry. So the question is, how do we use AI so it produces something small, reviewable, and aligned with your goal? And more to come soon. So I want to talk about now what AI has enabled me to do in my day-to-day work. So this is me right here. And say I'm getting a feature that I need to design. The first step is always to plan and define the tasks. I think this one is so important. Like, I can't just go to AI right away and say, build me this. It's not going to end up being a good result. So I take the time, actually plan. My team does 2 design reviews a week, so usually I'll go to a design review, get some feedback from senior engineers on my team. Then I'll break it up into smaller tasks. So I have a smaller task that I break it up into, another smaller task I might break it up into, and then another smaller task. And I can actually do all these tasks in the same day. That's something that was not able to happen before. But let's take a look at an example. So say I get the feature request, we need to enhance the Instagram DM experience based on Snapchat. We're trying to steal some of Snapchat's features. So I'm going to plan out this task. I'm going to break it down, say how am I going to do this, how long is it going to take me. The first task I'm going to create is adding the color themes. The second is going to be disappearing messages. And the third is going to be stickers. And I'm going to do those all in parallel at the same time. Launch different Claudes or different agents to do this work for me. But you see, the planning part was so important, and keeping these modularized is a way for me to go back and verify each of these small changes and make sure that AI is doing its job correctly. So that's kind of like what my day-to-day looks like these days. I actually want to show you a video. This is from Cursor, and it's a new IDE. So right now you might be using IntelliJ or Visual Studio Code as your IDE to interact with and write code with. Cursor is a new one that's like really AI forward. And I think this video really encapsulates like what my day-to-day workflow looks like doing multiple things in parallel. So I'll show you. Okay, cool. Well, the first thing I want you to notice is we're not looking at a screen full of code. Like right now, we're just kind of looking at a terminal or like kind of a prompt center. And I feel like that really reflects my experience of no longer looking at the lines of code and now interacting with a more chat interface. And then the second thing I want you to notice is that we have 4 tasks happening at once. And that's what AI locks with productivity, is the ability to parallelize what you're doing. Okay, so now we're going to move into what skills are most important today. And we're going to talk about 2 focuses. The first is design, which I kind of touched on before, and then the second is the actual coding with AI part. Starting with design, I really like this phrase, humans as architects, AI as the builder. I have a question for you all that I want you to talk to your partner about. If AI could generate a login page for a website in 10 seconds, why do we still need you to plan it? Talk to your partners. All right, I'll take a raise of hand for a volunteer for this question. Anyone want to volunteer? Yeah.
Having a plan allows you to adjust and update accordingly. If you just have AI do it, it'll be harder to be able to follow through what you process.
Yeah, exactly. It's easier to actually have a connection of understanding what you're doing and updating what you're doing with a plan rather than AI just automating that whole process and you not really remembering, oh, what are we doing? Anyone else? Okay, cool. Well, some ones I brainstormed, AI can generate code really quickly, but humans will still decide the system, constraints, and trade-offs. The hard part is not oh, can AI build this? It's, oh, what should it build? And is that correct? And is that the right thing to build? So I'm going to talk more about why planning matters. I think this meme does a really good job at explaining it. Vibe coding looks so great, but vibe debugging is horrible. Has anyone ever been trapped in a conversation with a chatbot that's going nowhere, going off the tracks? Hey, you did this wrong, fix this. I hate that experience personally. And that's why I try to make my prompts and plans as specific as possible so that AI can do its best job at one-shotting the solution. So yeah, vague prompt gives lots of wrong code. A clear design will actually give smaller, more reviewable changes. And a design doc is actually going to be context for both humans and the AI. You know, if you go back and look at a code change you did 2 months ago, you want to be able to understand, oh, why did I do that change? And why was that important? And having a design doc will actually help you get that immediately. It also will reduce wasteful AI slop that you probably end up discarding with just a simple prompt. So how to think like a software architect in the AI era, we have to create design documents. And what even goes into a design document? Well, I think a lot of things. This list does a pretty good job of summing it up. TLDR, goals and non-goals, alternatives considered, architecture, data model, a test plan, implementation plan, and a rollout and rollback plan. That sounds like, oh my gosh, that's so much. That sounds like a lot of work. I promise you, it's not that much work. And we're going to do an exercise soon. Let's just look at a really quick example with the Instagram direct messages. Say I'm creating a design doc for the new Instagram direct messages themes. My TLDR would be, let Instagram users choose approved DM themes. And we actually want to measure the number of times it was changed to increase the time users stay on the Instagram app. Goals and non-goals? Well, we want to support the accessible preset themes, and we don't want to allow custom color uploads or color pickers. Alternatives? Well, we consider global themes and custom colors, but the preset per theme seems safer and are simpler for like a version 1 first time we're doing this. Architecture and data model? Well, we can store a validated theme ID on each DM thread and then map it to approved theme assets. And we actually coordinated with that team, and they approved that extra metadata was all good to include. The test plan? Well, we need to test all the valid themes, you know, saving and loading those themes across different devices, like maybe both an iPhone and an Android, manually verify this full experience. Implementation plan? Well, we'll add the theme metadata, then we'll add the save and load support, then we'll add the theme picker UI, then the final DM rendering. And then the rollout plan, we'll launch to a small user group first, and then we'll fall back to the default theme if there's any issues or bugs. So that was like a very simple design document for this feature, but now if we gave this to AI, it'd be able to execute it pretty well instead of just giving it, hey, do this themes. Okay, so now we're going to do a really fun example, and it's going to be based on your Build Your Own World project. Maybe you always thought, oh, if I had more time and if I had AI, I could be more creative and build your own world. So today I want you to create a design document. It doesn't have to be super elaborate. I'm only going to give you 4 minutes, and it should be less than 1 page, and use any AI tools you want. And I'll be picking a random design document to actually use with AI. So I want you guys to go, here's a template, this link, they're tiny URLs. And then the second one is for submitting your Google Doc. So please open your computers, work with a partner if you can, and we'll get started. Not the whole game, just like a new feature. It can be as simple as like collecting coins or collecting flowers, or as complex as, oh, I want a whole nother mini game in my game. And please feel free to use AI if you want for this design process, but you also might just want to use your own creativity. Just a heads up, there's a 2-minute timer going. I know it's not nearly enough time, but try to submit something. Okay, I think the timer got reset, but like 1 minute left. This is the 1-minute warning.
I did not make mine with AI.
Yeah, which one is yours?
Mine ends with the, it starts with 1B/1JWRLI.
Okay, what is it, V? Oh, I see it. Oh, please approve me. Yeah, make sure the view is on. Okay, cool. Okay, cool. Thank you guys so much for submitting. So what I'm planning on doing is I have Cursor, which is this AI-powered IDE up, and I actually pulled up my old Build Your Own World project. Made sure it's still working. You know, I ran a run world and it pops up, and I'm gonna put in this design document, and we're gonna come back and see what it generates at the end of class, okay? So if you're with me, I'm just gonna copy this right in, and then we're gonna come back and see what it generates. Okay, it could totally fail. All right, moving on to our second focus, which is coding with AI. And there's some key definitions and things that are talked about all the time in industry that I think are really relevant to know. The first is this word called context. And this is the model's working memory in the chat. Like maybe you have interacted with chats and you've seen some type of like loading bar or like some type of context window and it's like a percent or it looks like it's filling up. That's because AI doesn't perform really well when you give it too much context. So this context window is the maximum amount of text the model can use at once. But it's really, really big now. Third, we have tokens. These are small chunks of text the model reads and writes, but the number of tokens doesn't mean your prompt and your output is going to be so much better. It's just a word that we use. Third is skills. I think this one's also really important. They're reusable, task-specific instructions, resources, or workflows. For example, like my team has a skill that helps with our on-call. So it knows everything about, you know, our common bugs we face, how our on-call works, and it's really helpful for that. And lastly, agents. These are AI systems that can plan, they can use tools and skills, observe results, and continue. And so a visual idea for context I have is a student walking into office hours. And you can imagine the student as your AI, and their backpack is what it has in context. So you can put in the spec, the relevant files, examples, and constraints, but if you put in the entire code base, you put in so many websites, and too much, maybe the student's backpack's gonna be overloaded. So we wanna leave out unrelated stuff to make sure the student has the best experience overall. So that's how I think about interacting with AI and giving it the context it needs. Here's also a really good chart. I think it has like 4 important pillars. First, like explaining what it even is we're building. Second, the purpose. Third, examples are super helpful. And lastly, the impact. So you can see some good examples and bad examples on this slide. And some prompting tips I use daily. First, describing bugs in detail. Oftentimes, you know, the code is already written and you're just debugging something that isn't working. So being able to describe what's wrong, where it happens, and what the expected behavior is super important. Next, using existing code as an example. In industry, you often want AI to follow what other teams have already built instead of designing it from scratch. Third, coordinating edits across files by naming where to edit, what to import, and what should or shouldn't change. And lastly, using a living markdown plan so AI can track its progress, decisions, and remaining tasks. I find this really helpful if I'm going to lunch and then I come back and I see, oh, where's my AI working on? Like, what did I leave off on? And I have the markdown file to quickly just get the human back in the loop. Okay, so now we're going to work on another example, and this is actually your attendance, so please pull this one up. It is 2 prompts that are no good. They don't have good context. So please work on revising these prompts. Feel free to work with those around you. So the first scenario is you're in your Build Your Own World game, and the player loads a saved world, and the screen is just blank. You have no idea what went wrong. You could like comb through all the files, but you want AI to help you debug. So what do you need to tell the AI? And the second is the player's collecting coins, but the score never updates or is shown anywhere on the UI. So what can you do? Great. Take a few minutes for this. While you're working on this, I'm going to check back on our plan.
Wait, so this is all autonomous, right?
Yeah, we're going to see what happens.
Wait, which model are you using?
I think it's GPT, but it's.
No, which model?
I wish I knew. I'm pretty sure I have it on GPT's latest model, 5.
I use GPT or Claude.
I think you can change it.
Which supporter are you?
All right. Got a couple minutes left for the attendance question and prompting. And I hope you're not looking at this being like, oh, this sounds so boring. This is a bad little task. I have to tell you, like in my day-to-day work, prompting has become what I do like all the time. And having the difference between having a really vague prompt and a really good prompt actually saves me like hours of time and mental energy. I feel like I learned it the hard way. Like I was a student and I was doing the prompts like, fix this, I don't know how this works. And then I went to industry and realized it doesn't work there. So I think this is like a super important skill. And definitely worth the extra like 1 minute it takes to write a good prompt.
Wait, what's your name?
I'm Stella.
Well, there's a question asking if you're in a lecture, what is the name of the hence I asked.
Okay, cool. So let's wrap up this one. So I was just talking about this like AI getting stuck. And this is an experience I felt as a student a lot. Even though sometimes I'd have okay prompts or good prompts, AI could lead me astray. And this is because the context window can get messy and overfilled. It can hallucinate things that don't exist. It could repeat the same bug. It could change approach randomly. Or it just crashes and loses track and it loads like infinitely. So then I become this like Mr. Angry. But how should you recover from this? My first recommendation is just to stop and start over. I find like a completely clear new chat, new context, new prompt that's actually helpful is way better than continuing to iterate on something that's failing. Second, probably shrink the task. Maybe it was too big. Third, be the AI's TA. Guide the AI, tell it what it needs to know. And lastly, ask yourself, do we need to give AI some tool it doesn't have yet? And a good example of this is I was trying to debug something for my team, and I gave it the link to like a Google spreadsheet. And it was like, oh, I can't even access the Google spreadsheet. I was like, oh, wait, we need to have some tool so the AI can access the Google spreadsheet so then it can learn more and give us the right output. So learning like then what additional tools we can give AI to help improve this experience. Lastly, verification. Say if AI writes all your code, all your tests, should we send it straight to production? I'll say generally no. Sometimes yes, but generally no. What matters is end-to-end behavior, making sure you really verify, does this work? The human explanation of why the changes is needed, you know, why did we need to do this change? Was AI just randomly making this up? Like, do we have an actual impact that this is going to like increase users on Instagram? Multiple reviewers, I think it's always good to get additional feedback to iterate on a first attempt. And lastly, all these values of correctness, security, performance, readability, and test coverage. AI will generate the code, but your job still is to judge and defend it. You might be in a meeting where someone asks about your AI-generated code, and you need to be able to explain why you did that code, who that code was for, and what your next steps will be. So your actionable takeaways today, please install GitHub Copilot, Cursor, or Claude Code. I think GitHub Copilot might be easiest to start with because it's already integrated with Visual Studio, but I think Cursor is amazing. And lastly, Claude Code is what we're using at Meta, so that would help prepare you for industry. Please try out these tools. We'll end it with some Q&A. Use AI as often as you can, but use it thoughtfully. And we can check on how our Build Your Own World is doing. And I'll take any questions as this goes. Yay! Yeah, I can totally stick around.
Okay, yeah.
Auto accept all my
All right.
permissions.
If you have questions, feel free to come up and ask. We'll be here for a bit.
If you're missing one AirPod, it's up here. Just one earbud.